This is Lord Thaddeus Cray, and today I'm going to be talking about something a wee bit different, and yet also a type of cryptid. What exactly am I going to be bringing up? This is somewhat of an expansion of one of my first videos. This is a type of dogman, but not the way you would think. Most dogmen are described, of course, as massive bipedal wolves. This, like I said, is much different from what I have heard and seen, at least when it comes to what I have researched. The CynoCephali is literally a dog-headed man. It is not a monster. It is not some gigantic bipedal wolf. It is literally a man or a woman with the head of a dog or a canine. It's just that simple. Now, did they exist? I believe it's a possibility. But also I do believe that it could have been an illusion when it comes to clothing or armor these guys wore, because they were very warlike. That much I know. Think about this. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, who was in Game of Thrones, he wore a helmet that looked like that of a hound. So anything's possible. Also, another thing is Stargate. The original Stargate. You know, they had those goons that would dress up, and they would have these big old jackal-like helmets. You never know. But I do believe that there was something going on with this. I also believe that there's a good possibility these creatures were flesh and blood. There have been definitely descriptions of these things that were found in India, as a matter of fact. I'm going to go ahead and do a slight, not really reading, but kind of skip over and bring up what a man, he was a Greek physician. His name was Ctesias, around 400 BC. So, I mean, this is well over 2,000 years ago. You have to understand that. So, anyway, this is what this dude said about them. They didn't speak at all. They barked like dogs to each other. That's how they communicated. They had big, massive teeth. Larger, of course, than regular dogs, because, of course, a human being is... I mean, don't get me wrong, there's dogs that are bigger than people, but that's not common, is my point. Their nails were claws, like that of a dog, but they were longer and slightly rounder. They lived in the mountains. As far as the River Indus is where they were. This is in India, you gotta remember that. They were dark-skinned. Very, very dark-skinned. Just like the rest of the natives they associated with. They understood the Indian language, but they could not speak. They could only bark and make sign language with their hands. They lived on raw meat. These things would, of course, raise sheep, goats, donkeys, and pretty much lived almost, for the time period, they lived a lot like people, to an extent. They actually had these kind of fruit they would put in rafts, and they would load these rafts up with some kind of purple flowers. I'm thinking they would somehow barter with these kind of things. And they'd pretty much barter these kind of affairs, and they would get, goods and stuff back in return. These guys were also known as, for being ferocious in battle, vicious. Also, they lived in caves. They were, as I said, warriors, supposedly mercenaries, very feared, and very, I'm just saying, it's just very interesting. And their hygiene, of course, naturally, you would expect, would probably not be the best. Supposedly, they lived in caves, which, of course, makes sense through their primal nature. They would hunt with bows, arrows, and spears, very quick. It's very interesting. Their women would bathe once a month. The men wouldn't bathe at all, but wash their hands. Of course, they'd use oil, and they were clean to an extent, but probably for, the people of the culture at the time, and many times now. So, I'm just saying, it's very interesting. And these creatures lived a very long life, which is another thing that fascinates me. These things live close to, I'll be honest, they lived almost 2 centuries. That right there is very unique. So there's something going on with that. So, that in itself is something that, I'm just saying, I think it's something more than just people going around wearing dog-like helmets, if you get my drift. And there was a whole story about one such CynoCephali. His name was St. Christopher. That right there is very interesting. He was a massive man with the head of a large dog. Supposedly in Christian mythology, or the faith, he supposedly met Christ, and he learned the error of his former ways. You got to remember, he was a warrior, a killer, vicious. And supposedly, he became baptized, repented of the evil he had done. So apparently these creatures, at least according to some, have human souls, which is very interesting. And supposedly Christ made him look human. However, there are certain, I've seen a few of these even in stores where I've gone, you see pictures of St. Christopher. Basically a man holding like a cross or something, dressed as a saint, according to Catholic tradition, and he's got the head of a big old dog. So, I mean, I'm just saying, something's up with that. You really have to figure that. Also, you have to understand this. Marco Polo, he mentioned these things. I'm going to go ahead and what he described. Basically, these creatures without a king, they love to worship idols. Of course, you have to understand, the mindset of a person when it comes to different things. And of course, these creatures probably walk to the beat of their own drum, and you can't blame them for that because they are what they are. These things supposedly were terrifying, very deadly, and they did not like anyone of their own race at all. They were vicious. This is closer to something that I would almost expect out of something like this. But also, I'm pretty sure they weren't treated the best either, so they probably had to be isolative. But either way, they had the heads of big mastiffs, which is, yeah, no thank you. My point is, there's also been sightings of these creatures that live, possibly even to this day. I've actually heard, you got to take a lot of this stuff as a grain of salt. You have to understand that. Even when I do what I do, I take everything I hear with a grain of salt, even though I have an open mind. And here's the deal. When it comes to this, there have been reports of these creatures possibly even being around today, actually living in caves and maybe even different types of dwellings. You never know. I mean, it's very possible. And of course, you also have to understand another thing when it comes to the dog-headed men. Who do you think, you got to remember, Egyptian mythology has many, many, many gods who have, of course, the heads of animals. And one of the most famous ones is, of course, the one that was kind of, I guess you could call him the god of the dead. He would weigh the hearts, those found, lacking or in their version of evil. Of course, those souls and that heart, which had the soul, will be fed to basically be fed to a monster, and that was it. That was a wrap. But my point is that deity I'm talking about that would judge was known as Anubis. And what did he have? The head of a jackal. And of course, there are stories of, I think they're called Anubites, if I remember right. They were his followers. They were similar creatures. Now, I might be wrong on that. But I'm just saying, it's something you really might want to think about, to say the least. Of course, it's very possible they may have been killed off in wars or cleansed, especially with, you have to understand, when Christianity gained power, brother, it gained power. And I believe a lot of things were either wiped out or driven underground. Maybe literally. So it's something to think about. The CynoCephali, I do believe, possibly quite seriously and probably truthfully existed at one time. Do I think they do now? I can't tell you. People and other creatures, you have to understand one thing, man. When it comes to what I call evolution, and I'm not talking necessarily Darwin's theory, but I've said this before, we do change and adapt to our surroundings, not just spiritually, but physically, if you understand my point. Science itself proves this, one way or the other. But I'm not going to go off on a tangent like that. I do believe that these creatures are simply something that developed according to their environment. Now, whether they are tied to humanity or not, I don't know. That's for people with a better pay grade than me. But I've always found these things fascinating, and I do believe that if you do more research on these creatures, you can find, believe me, maybe more things than I know. Believe me, I look forward to that. I'm just doing pretty much what I'm here to do. Kind of give you a glimpse into the doorway you can go through. Just make sure you don't go too far down the rabbit hole. But anyway, you guys already know who I am and what I do. I'm going to go ahead and just still leave it out there. The fact is, I love to give people the opportunity to tell their stories. It's what I do. It's what I enjoy doing. If you've had a supernatural experience, whether it be paranormal, ghosts, anything, hit me up at wesvic@dogmancams.com, and I'll go ahead and make sure that you and Sean Graham get to talking. He's the one that hosts Chasing the Truth. It's an awesome radio show, and he's a pretty decent dude, I'll tell you right now. Can't have anyone better at your back. The other, of course, would possibly actually be more related to this video. If you've seen a dog-headed man, a dogman, a Bigfoot, anything, maybe a Littlefoot, who knows? But if you've seen a cryptid and had that kind of experience, and you want to let people know about these things, I'm the first guy to talk to on that. I can hook you up with John Bell. He, of course, hosts the Dogman Camp show. And the fact is, like I said, he's also a good guy. He will definitely listen to you, and he has an open mind. Also, I'm going to go ahead and put another one out there. If you want to hear some awesome or good horror narrations, man, or good stories in general, and what I mean by this is a lot of, most of these stories, if not all of them, there's some truth based on them. So, believe me, of course, things have to be kind of kept in the dark to an extent when it comes to protecting people. But I'm telling you right now, if you want to hear some good, awesome, experiences, you go ahead and go on to the site, IamDarkWaters.com. It's $5 a month. You get some awesome content, and believe me, I know the man personally. He's a good dude. You couldn't have anyone, again, better at your back. Again, if you guys want to go ahead and contact me in any way, shape, or form, hit me up at wesvic@dogmancams.com. You guys be safe and be careful out there.